ஏதன் கண்ணே நிலையாகி இருந்திடும் உலகமெல்லாம் எதனதெல்லாம் எதனின்று அனைத்துலகும் எழுமோ மற்றிவையாவும் எதன் பொருட்டாம் எதனாலே ஐயமெல்லாம் எழுந்திடும் எல்லாமும் எதுவே ஆகும் அதுதானே உளப்பொருளாம் சத்தியமாம் அச்சொருபம் அகத்தில் வைப்பாம். Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we have come to the concluding discussions on the Ulladu Narpadu, Anubandham. Though the topic at hand is the infinite self and no amount of explanation or discussion can be anywhere near adequate, we still, as part of satsang, make this effort with Bhagavan's grace. For concluding, I have taken the last verse of Anubandham and the invocatory verse selected by Bhagavan from Yoga Vasishtam, and as it is generally felt that after a study of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, one should get back and make a thorough study of Ulladu Narpadu again. I have included the invocatory verse of Ulladu Narpadu, though we may not be going into it to the fullest. I just want to draw some reference as to how Bhagavan has included all the teachings of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham in the Ulladu Narpadu itself. So that is in one sense the aim of this concluding session, that the whole of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham is such a wonderful selection from the scriptures, and how Ulladu Narpadu in itself contains the sadhana that will include all the teachings of Anubandham automatically. So we go into this concluding discussion. I am not going to chant the 3 verses. I am going to take the meanings and then go ahead with the concluding discussion. The last verse says, I shall truly declare the essence of the established conclusion of all Vedanta. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Stara, Bhagavan says, and goes ahead and enunciates the teaching, the essence of Vedanta. If I, the ego, dies and I, the real self, is found to be that absolute reality, know that I, the real self, which is the form of consciousness, alone will be what remains. So what is the reality that remains? If I, the ego, dies and I, the real self, is found to be the absolute reality, know that the I, the real self, which is the form of consciousness alone, will be what remains. The invocatory verse that we started off with from Anubandham, from Yoga Vasishtam, which Bhagavan has translated into Tamil, contains the meaning that we adore. So the work is a form of adoration of the self. We adore that real existence, which is all. Now in the work Vichara Sangraham, Bhagavan would have begun with a small note, how to adore the self, which is all, except by abiding one as that, or one with that. That when the truth is all, how can you adore it standing apart from it? Because that will be that it creates a mark, or it creates a spot in the truth, which is all. Can you stand apart from it and adore it? Is the meaning there in the starting, in the beginning of Vichara Sangraham, or the book Self-Enquiry, the instructions to Gambiram Seshaya. We adore that real existence, the connection being that the real existence is that I which appears by itself, self-luminous, when the ego is destroyed. When the ego is completely dead and gone, and that state where the real I, which is of the form of pure consciousness, shines by itself, that is the object of adoration in the opening verse. We adore that real existence, that real I, which is all, whose are all the things, and by whom are all made, for whom have all sprung, for whom they exist, in whom they subsist, into whom do all return, and into which they are all absorbed. These are all the noun cases, the small adjustments that can be made to the noun. 8 such noun cases are supposed to be there in both Sanskrit and in Tamil. So in Tamil also, Bhagavan has used 7 of the cases except the invocatory case. All the other cases have been used. So that reality is everything. That which you... so it is for that reality, it is by the contents of the reality, it is for its sake, and it is the source, it is that end into which everything is absorbed. So all the 7 noun cases are included in the verse, which only means that reality is everything, is all. That is what we adore. And the invocatory verse in Ulladu Narpadu, which we go, the Ulladala Ullavunar, that is, if the reality I did not exist, could there exist the consciousness am, the consciousness of one's own existence? Since that reality exists in the heart devoid of thought, how to or who can meditate upon that reality, which is called the heart? Know that abiding in the heart as the reality is, that is without thought, as I am, that alone is meditating upon the reality. So we find that in Ulladu Narpadu, there is no reference to the world at all. And the adoration is also now made into abiding as the reality. So to begin with itself, we can make a note of that. Then we can go into the concluding discussions of the study of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham and our journey back to the study and practice of the teachings of Ulladu Narpadu again. Now, one of the questions that arises from a study of these 3 verses, the last verse of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, the invocatory verse of the Anubandham, and the invocatory verse of Ulladu Narpadu, that the real I is the false I vanishes and the real I remains on enquiry. Whereas in Ulladu Narpadu, the invocation and contents hardly mention the world or the source. The focus is only on the false I. and the worship is by abiding. Is the knowing of the world and its source important? So, when we make this journey back to Ulladu Narpadu, one of the questions that arises is that in Anubandham, there was this some focus on the world. For instance, even in the Anubhava segment, we have a verse which says that to the jnani who has attained self-realization, the light of effulgence of the self will automatically be there, and there will be strength of mind. And just as in the spring, everything flourishes, there will be a flourishing in and around the jnani. That kind of reference we won't find in Ulladu Narpadu, even in the Anubhavam segment. The Anubhavam segment of Ulladu Narpadu, which contains about 10 verses, they all contain teachings of now about the Advaita or about how karma ends, but not about the Ulaham. Now, how that whole study, which is done in Anubandham to a little extent, and a lot in other scriptures, how Bhagavan is removing that from our requirement of study, a bit of attention will clear our sadhana also. Because if Bhagavan is removing that, then lot of thoughts about that are not required in our sadhana. Lot of analysis of the world is not required in our sadhana, as we even make the transition from understanding Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham to Ulladu Narpadu. Now, one of the ways in which we can look at it is the jnani's anubhava is that the world, the ego, and the Lord, the Ishvara, are nothing but the self. The truth of all the three is only the Atma, is only the self. Now, Bhagavan says to that student we had seen in our last discussion that it is the instrument with which you see the world that determines the nature of the world that you perceive. Is it not? And he brings that discussion to the root instrument being the I thought. The I thought being the instrument with which we perceive the world. A gentle reminder that we are exploring how Bhagavan is able to remove this whole area, which is such a vast area of thoughts, from our necessity, from the need of explanation. For instance, what is that is happening in, let's say, some war is going on, or something is happening in the family that seems to be very important, or someone is in particular state. In doing sadhana, while sitting for Atma Ucharam, why those thoughts are not required or how they are taken care of is what we are exploring. And how Bhagavan makes way for that, that is freeing us of the necessity to go into that huge world of thoughts concerning the outside world, is that he says the world or the object perceived, the truth of it depends on the instrument you use. And that instrument we all are using is the I thought or the I am the body thought. This I am the body thought, he says, is made of the two components which we were able to discuss the last time around. That the two components in the I am the body thought are I, the consciousness, and body. These two things have certain diametrically opposite qualities. The body is born, it is made up of 5 elements, then it is not perceived or it does not exist in deep sleep, and after death we dispose it off or it goes back to the elements. Whereas consciousness has no such transformations. Consciousness is not born, is not made of many conditionings or components, and continues to exist in deep sleep, and also there is no decomposition or death for consciousness, but somehow there is this mixing of that which is immortal with that which is mortal, and something in between has arisen as the I thought, the I am the body thought, which is what is asked to be removed completely in the last verse. So this content of the mortal elements in the consciousness is directly removed by putting attention on the I thought. That is what Bhagavan says to Kapali Shastri. We had seen in one of the earlier discussions where Kapali Shastri raises this objection to Bhagavan. Every time I ask something about the world or something about the object or something about knowledge, you now divert me and you put the question of Brahmastram as for whom is this, doubt the doubter and all that. It is not that I understand your method, it is that I am just flummoxed into not questioning. Bhagavan says, wait, it's not as damaging as that. I come to your aid. What really happens there is that whenever you turn the attention away from the thought and put it on the instrument called I thought, then the content of the I thought, which is attached to the body, that attachment is removed a little bit, and the pure light of the self starts seeping into the I thought. So without reference to your worldly circumstances or the thought-based presence, you already make a transformation or movement from ignorance to knowledge. So that is the importance of the who am I, that without aiming for any change in your present circumstances, in the present moment in this world, already there is a spiritual change inside from removing a little bit of attachment to the mortal stuff within us, within the instrument, and moving a little bit towards the immortal self. That is why I am asking you to ask, for whom is this thought or doubt the doubter? Even more importantly than discussing about the circumstance you are in or the thought you have raised as a very important doubt, more important than that is to turn your attention on yourself, says Bhagavan. Therefore, by clearing that instrument, the I thought, what happens is, once the mortal elements, the vasanas, are completely removed, there is only the pure consciousness, the real I, which rises and shines. There is no effort required to know what the world is. That real I itself is the world. That real I itself is the sadhaka who started the journey. That real I is itself the God which the sadhaka wanted to adore and worship. So by making this transformation in the instrument with which we perceive the world and with which we want to perceive God, with that singular act of transforming, by putting attention on that instrument again and again, Bhagavan relieves us of this burden of having to analyze the tattvas. What are the various contents of this world, which a little bit are included in the Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, that we find is removed there. Then we come upon the question of grace, because that explanation seems to make it as though everything is done by our effort. So who is this our remains a question, and if that is understood, this question doesn't arise about grace. But however, we find immediately after that answer by Bhagavan to Kapali Shastri in the Saddarshana Bhashya, Kapali Shastrigal asked this very intelligent question that, oh, then everything is done by our effort, is it not? They are not ordinary questioners. So they have gone into the scriptures in depth. So we can see the value of that question. See, in that explanation, it appears as though the ego is going through everything and doing everything by itself and coming to the self. So Kapali Shastri asks this question that, oh, then it is that we can save ourselves by ourselves, is it not? That there is no need for grace. Bhagavan says, no, that you have even started the attempt to make self-enquiry, is that the grace has started to act on you. And it is a combination of grace and effort. Grace completely blesses only the one who wants to put the fullness of his effort, though it may be like a sparrow carrying a little bit of water or a squirrel carrying a little bit of mud to make but you have to make that full effort. Then grace supports you is what it's a combination of grace and effort, says Bhagwan in answer to Kapal Shastri. But we can look at it in another way, in line with our discussions during this period. What really happens is that when we start clearing with who am I, we start seeing in the discrete world, in the world of connections, how many connections are there for this particular speech to happen. For if I have to come as an entity, as an individual, I have to come and deliver this, let's say, the concluding discussion on Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham. How many events are connected to it, far beyond that which the ego can influence in any way at all. The ego, which has a little bit of aggregation of bodily parts, and which has a little bit of aggregation of knowledge of English and experiences that it has gathered together, and let's say it is calling itself as Nanda Kumar or the ego, then how little, as we start doing self-inquiry, how little that ego knows and how little that ego has a role in this particular event taking place, that the hugeness of the connections. And we tend to agree with Tom Chi, the scientist, who says that everything from Big Bang is connected and we are all connected in the subconscious. If everything is connected, then the probability of this event taking place by my effort, the ego, which is a small part of it, having a little bit minuscule part of the connections that are really there, that probability is very, very low. Therefore, the grace or the unknown has played a huge part in this simple event of communication taking place. So the ego need not feel great about it or make a fuss about it at all. That there is surrender to that whole scheme of things which has allowed this to take place, though the effort is still there. Even in the line of discussions we have had, we find even an intellectual like Barack Obama, in the discussions after his retirement, he has put this question by Letterman in one of the interviews, that do you feel lucky about having been made the president? He says that nothing more can be true about it, because though I value myself as a hardworking and a talented person, I can easily recall at least 10 other people who are more deserving of the role I have played. He is still speaking from his knowledge only. There could be many other people, but he said, to my knowledge, at least there are 10 other people who could have been there. Hence, I find that there is a huge amount of God's grace. They don't use the word God's grace. They say luck. In my having served 2 terms, in fact, I am going to set up this academy for training leaders, not merely for encouraging their hard work and improving their talent, but to see if this gold dust can spread, this gold dust of God's grace, which is there with effort, says Bhagwan. Wherever effort is there, wherever sincere effort is there, Shraddha is there, their grace has already started working, says Bhagwan. But we don't know, we don't have any kind of, so there the surrender and the outlook, how much more has gone into each of our activity and how little the ego has a role to play. This starts allowing surrender and understanding that the self, the real I, is full of grace. As it is infinite and is not within the grasp of the ego at all, and only when the ego is destroyed, the self appears. What really has done all the work is only grace. Now, that is the role of grace, is what we can find from this. So the effort, how Bhagwan puts the effort to its root, to catch hold of the root and remove it by clearing that instrument, the I thought, of all the element of mortality, and allow that pure self to rise and shine. And what is the role of grace? Everything is grace. As Bhagavan says, when Muruganar asks, what is the role of grace? Why do we say we suffer? Bhagavan says, whenever we say we are in trouble, we are not feeling the real happiness, then it is like somebody standing on the banks of Ganges and saying that he is thirsty. Then he realizes, no, that's not good enough. It is like somebody who is standing neck deep in Ganges saying that he is thirsty. Then Bhagavan says, no, even better analogy is there. It is as though the fish in the Ganges is saying that it is thirsty. Then Bhagavan finally says, no, even that can be improved upon. It is like Ganges itself saying, I am thirsty. We are all the form of grace. Then the ego is completely removed. There is nothing but anugraha. There is nothing but grace. Grace alone is there. That is the form of, that is the swarupa, the self, which is only grace and completely grace alone. That is the relationship between effort and grace that we come through Anubandham and Ulladu Narpadu. Now, we go on to one core topic which is common to both the Ulladu Narpadu and Anubandham, which is that both talk of eternal being, the Ulla Porul, the reality. The eternal being means that which is. The Ulla Porul is talked of in both the Anubandham indirectly, or the reality is referred, so we can take directly also. In Ulladu Narpadu, directly the reference is to Ulla Porul. Now this eternal being has been something that everybody has found in philosophy, in whatever branches of truth study you take in human beings. They have found it very difficult to prove, but they still make the effort and arguments. And how is it that Bhagavan is asking us to realize this eternal being, this iruvike, this iruppu? Now, a gentle look at that won't harm. What is this iruvike? Because we'll be looking at it in detail as we go into Ulladu Narpadu. But it won't harm us in any way if we have a look at that what is this eternal being? To have a glance of eternal being, we should have an understanding of the awareness of eternal being, the Ulla Unarvu. That is not very complicated in Bhagavan. He makes it very simple. So, though as a concept, it may appear very complicated to philosophers, Bhagavan makes it very simple for us. Let us take a dive into that. Make an attempt now. And the study of Ulladu Narpadu is going to come back to this topic again. That is the awareness of eternal being or Ulla Unarvu. Usually what happens when these discussions come is that I take the book to my mother and the attendant is also there and we have a discussion, chat amongst ourselves. And I started off the Ulladu Narpadu from Sivaprakasham Pillai, which is such a wonderful commentary, explanation of Ulladu Narpadu, a small book, Ulladu Narpadu Urai by Sri Sivaprakasham Pillai, simply wonderful. What great devotees Bhagavan has had. You don't need to go anywhere other than that small booklet to know about Ulladu Narpadu. Now, we were discussing that about this Ulla Unarvu, that is the awareness of being. Bhagavan starts with not the Ulla Unarvu of chair or that or this. He says that everybody has this Ulla Unarvu. When somebody is asked, so I ask the attendant, do you feel you exist? I ask my mother, do you feel you exist? And I also joined them. He said, yes, there is this feeling that I exist. From there, we could move. The attendant is worried about her parents whom she has left in Tiruvannamalai. My mother had thoughts about my brother who had passed away. And I had thoughts about taking Ulladu Narpadu and discussing with them. So I said, when those three thoughts are there, now for whom is this thought about the parents in Tiruvannamalai? For whom is this thought about the wonderful son who could take care of her so well? For whom is this thought about taking Ulladu Narpadu? Immediately it came that for all three of us, it is for us, it is for me. Now we immediately could discover that is the Ulla Unarvu. Don't you exist? Is the Shweta not existing? Is Akila not existing? Is Nandakumar not existing? Yes, we exist. I exist. So any thought I get is based on or arises only after my Ulla Unarvu. Then we expanded to see that this whole waking state, does it not arise after my Ulla Unarvu? There the mind changes, but we can go into that later. But the answer was yes. For whom is this waking state? For whom is this thought of God? For whom is this thought of God or meditation on God as apart? It is for my Ulla Unarvu. Now there we came when our meditation on God itself is dependent on this Ulla Unarvu. Meditation on the entire creation is dependent on the Ulla Unarvu. Then that Ulla Unarvu is awareness of eternal being. The awareness of eternal being, because without that existing, no other thing can arise. From a simple fact of do you exist, Bhagavan says, holding that, you will realize that Ulla Unarvu of me existing, when you hold it, will be realized to be the awareness of eternal being. When you see that everything else arises only after and depending on this Ulla Unarvu. All three of us, with Bhagavan's grace, could understand that. That means her worry about her parents can be put to the Ulla Unarvu, which is present in the parents, taking care of them. The Ulla Unarvu means the awareness of eternal being is present in all the jivas, including the lizard which was there. You said it is there, that Ulla Unarvu is there. When something approaches it, it moves to protect itself or to seek that as a food. So Ulla Unarvu is there. Now that Ulla Unarvu is there in me, and we took the discussion to see now who says the different people, different individuals exist. There is that Ulla Unarvu. So all the individuals, whether divine, whether Gandharvas or this or that or normal human beings, all are dependent after the rise of the Ulla Unarvu. So holding that Ulla Unarvu, one understands that is the awareness of eternal being. Everything else being non-eternal, the Bhagavan's asking us to hold this is the direct empowerment of the sadhaka with the grace of Ishvara. Ishvara is the one who completely transcends all the non-eternal beings and is aware of that. He is self-luminously shining as I, whose eternal being can stand alone and independent of all the non-eternal beings, including waking, dream and deep sleep. That is what is the Ulla Unarvu. So here the eternal being cannot be explained because in explanation we come to the Triputi, the triad, the explainer, the act of explanation and the explained is there. Whereas in the Ulla Unarvu, the awareness of eternal being, there is only Akhanda, there is only self-awareness, there is no awareness of the other. So all the worlds of having dyads and triads are consumed or absorbed or taken in or are present in only in this Purana of I. So the eternal being can be experienced or one can be aware of that only by identity or identification with that awareness. And Bhagavan's teachings is that you hold that and be quiet. That is his first teaching to Gambiram Seshaya. So we move from how to experience eternal being being aware of eternal being is to hold your own Ulla Unarvu and hold it in the challenge of any other object that arises. Keep holding it. Then that itself will reveal itself as this Purana or awareness of eternal being. Bhagavan goes to the next step. To Gambhiram Seshaya, in the first answer to ask to how to do self-inquiry, Bhagavan says that treat the body which has a beginning, which is made of 5 elements, which is not present in deep sleep and which is going to die and going to merge in the elements. Keep that as inert, keep that as a corpse, and with attention start inquiring, what is it that arises in me as I? Don't even take the I thought, but keenly inquire, what is it that arises in me as I? There will arise that Spurana, that which is Akhanda, that which is continuous, as against the thoughts which were broken up. The self-luminous Purana will arise. And he says to Gambhiram Seshayar, hold it and remain still, and that Spurana will remove the I am the body attachment completely. And in the end, it will also quieten down like the fire lit in camphor. Having burnt all your I am the body attachment, it will give you sahaja, merger into it, and having nothing else to burn, it will also quieten down. From awareness of eternal being, it becomes eternal being. Or it reveals itself, there is no becoming there, it reveals itself as the simple eternal being, which is the Adhara of the Ishvara as well as the Adhara of the Jiva. The smallest of the Jivas you can take, Isha Jivayor Veshadhibida Satsvabhavato Vastu Kevalam. The difference between Ishvara and Jiva may be there in their mind and their ability to connect everything or not connect everything and their form. But in the Satsvabhava, in the simple act of being, which has consumed even the Spurana, which has awareness of being, has been consumed in the simple being. That is what is the Adhara for everything. That is Sahaja Samadhi. To be in that simple being, having completely burnt everything by holding this Purana, that is Sahaja Samadhi, which irrespective of what is objectively going on, this can never be touched by the objective happening. That's why Bhagavan says, the actions will go on, but you be as you are, he says. Now comes the next question, that in the self-inquiry or Vichara Sangraham, Bhagavan says to Gambhiram Seshayar, hold this Purana and be still. Whereas if you come to the next work, the work of Who Am I, the discussions of question and answers with Sivaprakasham Pillai, in the answer number 11, if you observe, there is no mention of hold this Purana and be still. If you keep inquiring, there will arise the reality as I says Bhagavan, and leaves it at that. He doesn't instruct the ego to hold this Purana and be still. Now, if you inquire into that, you find that there is this slight difference between whence am I and who am I. In fact, in the instructions to Gambhiram Seshayar, in asking him to see from what is it that arises as I, Bhagavan has begun with the adoration of the self. That is why he begins the invocation also is how to adore the self. It is a worship. It is first is you understand that is far greater than you. In fact, that self only has risen as the awareness of eternal being, which is Ishvara. Therefore, that Ishvara Shakti is there and which subsides into the self. Therefore, the adoration is to be understood before the identification in who am I is understood and carried out. Now, so the what is it that rises as I is whence am I? And in who am I, what happens is, why does Bhagavan not ask the who am I practitioner to hold this Purana and keep still? We may still do it, having understood that we practice both whence am I and who am I. We will hold it and be still, and sometimes we will identify. So in who am I, what happens is, Even from beginning of sadhana, the source of the I is not treated as separate from the I. It is abheda bhakti. It is jnana marga. Even in who am I practice, the bhakti is the, what is it that rises as I? Who am I is the jnana marga. From the beginning itself, there is no split between the identity of the I and its source. The I itself is its source. So in who am I, as we leave the thoughts and this purana arises, there is no need to hold because there is direct identification. That one is this Purana. And the nature of Spurana, Bhagavan says in the Ashtakam, that it is the Manigalil Saradana Uirdorum Nana Madandarum Uruvanai Maruvine Nida. It connects all the discrete existences by being beyond them. By being beyond the Triputi and by being its self-luminous self, it is able to connect all the events. That's where something connected here is connected 3000 years ago, or all those connections we find, but it is all the self-luminous self which connects far beyond the connections that the ego can imagine. So it is the Manigalil Sarad, the self-luminous self, the awareness of eternal being is that which connects. But there is another nature of that self-luminous self which Bhagavan is referring here. It is that it can stand alone. It is not only the connecting thread, but it has its ability to stand alone, to be free of all the manigal, all the discrete entities. It can be free of by being self-luminous. That is, it has absorbed all the discrete entities. All the worlds are absorbed in the I. Therefore, in who am I, we identify with the standalone Spurana, and the Spurana is seen as the natural going on of I without effort. That is, who am I, who am I, who am I, who am I, or I is going on. Previously, it was with effort because vasanas had some energy. They were pulling us out. So we had to put in effort to turn inward and hold the I. But when all those vasanas that which push us out, what Sadhuam Swamigal calls as spring which pushes you out, all those springs are made dull and dead and gone. When there is no more springing out, then automatically one is identified with the Spurana. In who am I, we identify with this Spurana. And what is this Spurana? It is that self-inquiry going on automatically. Previously with effort, just like in Japa, we get to the Ajapa state. In Vichara, we get to the state of Spurana being automatic Vichara or self-luminous inquiry. Now what happens there? In that, there is no holding and keeping quiet and allowing the Spurana to remove the I am the body idea. But this automatic going on of self-inquiry itself will quieten this Spurana. Who am I who wants to shine? Having observed everything, Yarige is Purana. For whom is this shining? There, even the who am I quietens this Purana by itself. There is no other holding and waiting required. But the one who is doing self-inquiry in who am I, though identification clearly understands the earlier path shown by Bhagavan of holding this Purana and being still. That is Ishvara. You can treat Ishvara as your source, hold him and be still, and he will remove all your body identity. You can merge with him, then he will reveal his true form as the self. Or by who am I, without that description, though clearly understanding what it is. Bhagavan says, without that jnana, real jnana will not come. Without the jnana of Spurana and how Spurana has consumed all the worlds, real jnana or real abundance of self will not come. Somebody saying merely awareness of awareness is the self. That doesn't work, says Bhagavan in the talks. That you have to experience this Purana, and this Purana has to reveal itself either by identity or as the God to whom you are holding on. It has to reveal that it has now consumed all the worlds and is standing alone. And when that quietens down and your Sat Swabhava is there, that Sat Swabhava is the Adhara for Isha, that is Ishvara and Jiva. So the Sat Swabhava is not merely awareness of awareness that comes in between for the Jiva. It is the Adhara for both the Jiva and the Ishvara, and it should be experienced as that. That you should understand that now the Adhara of Ishvara himself is there. That this Purana itself has quieted down. Till then, Bhagavan will not leave. Till then, Atma Uchara will not leave. Whence am I will not leave. Who am I will not leave. It will be with us. It is the Brahmastram, the who am I and whence am I, which is still self-enquiry only. Either you treat the sources apart. In talk 642, you can go and refer in the talks. Bhagavan gives this description of this difference in sadhana to a question from who else? Lakshman Sharma sir, who has written the commentary on Ulladu Narpadu. He asked that question, what is this difference between Swaswarupa Anusandhanam Bhaktiritya Bhidiyate, and the other one is Swatma Tattva. Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam Pare Joguhu. He says that what is the difference between Swaswarupa Anusandhanam and Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam? Bhagavan says Swaswarupa Anusandhanam is who am I, and Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam is whence am I? Yeah. Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam Bhakti Ritya Pare Jogu. The first one, who am I, is Jnana. The other one, that is, what is it that rises as I, is whence am I. There a difference between the Jiva and the Paramatma is admitted. So one can call that as the Bhakti Marga of who am I. Therefore, the whole of Bhakti Marga is clearly understood by the practitioner of who am I. The whole of the greatness of Bhakti Marga is understood, that there is a source. So far as you are a limited being with few connections, Ishvara is there who connects everything. That is clearly experienced as the awareness of eternal being. As you go in the journey, even that awareness of eternal being, it quietens down into the simple eternal being, which is the self. Till one abides as that self, that irvike, that existence, which is beyond existence and non-existence, this Atma Vicharam will not leave the sadhaka. It is the Brahmastram. So let us hold it, let us practice it, either with identity as who am I, or by diving and saying, oh, from where the I thought is arising. When anything else arises, let it be the greatest of thoughts, let it be the smallest of thoughts. Can it exist without my existence? Without the Ulla Unarvu? What is that Ulla Unarvu in me? Which is the Ulla Unarvu in everything? Which is the Ishvara Shakti? Why not take that power? Why should I face the world as Nandakumar, the weak fellow? Why should I not allow that power to run the show? That's why Bhagavan says, don't be afraid to go to that source. What will run the life for you is no more that weakling, but that source of all. That source of all Ulla Unarvu. Anybody feels Ulla Unarvu, this is the source, and that is there in us. Hold that, and that itself quietens down into Paramashanti. The Paramashanti of the self. Therefore, Bhagavan says, that which is complete Shanti, complete peace, is itself total Shakti when it rises to meet the world. Be completely abiding in the self, in the eternal being. When it meets the world, it meets as that awareness of eternal being, which cannot be challenged by any other existence. Both ways, Bhagavan empowers and takes us and makes us abide in the truth. The power has to be subsided into the truth, because truth alone is the reality. One should not even try to be this Purana, but continue to Bhagavan's instructions to quieten. Be still. That is enough. With Bhagavan's grace, let us sit in practice for 10 minutes. Namo Ramana. Namo Ramanaka. Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramana. Prostration to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of that self manifest as Ramana, we have done the pilgrimage of Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, and Nandakumarji brought us back to the beginning of the Anubandham to complete that cycle, the prayer, and then connected us to the prayer of Ulladu Narpadu, wherein Bhagavan is taking us from here. And very beautifully, the apparent difference between the two in terms of the Ishvara Shakti being predominantly present in the Anubandham and the Ishvara Shakti being defined only as a self in Ulladu Narpadu. That is, the self being all-inclusive, the only and all-inclusive power in Ulladu Narpadu. And in Anubandham, its manifestation is Ishvara as the Adhara of all manifestations. This was the first important point and the difference which was brought out to us. And he went on to say that when we do not explicitly see the Ishvara Shakti, it does not mean it is absent, because the self itself is the Ishvara Shakti. And the very first verse of Ulladu Narpadu is an adoration verse of the self, because otherwise Bhagavan need not have asked the question, how do we adore it? How do we think of it? How do we remember it? He could have simply said there is this porul, that's all, there is nothing apart from it. But he has said, so in that he has made it into an invocation, he has made it into an adoration, he has made it into a prayer, and he wants us to understand or come closer to the understanding of the indivisibility. So he has not mentioned it as a separate Ishvara Shakti in the first prayer verse of Ulladu Narpadu. We find that, of course, in the very first verse of Ulladu Narpadu, he refers only to he refers to the world, and he refers to the Ishvara Shakti. He says, if you see a world, because we see a world. Here, in Anubandham, he is talking about the Ishvara Shakti as the base of the world. He is not questioning the manifestation in terms of the world. But in Ulladu Narpadu, he questions, it is the inquiry. It is only because we see a world that we have to accept the existence of Ishvara. If we do not see the world, then where is the Ishvara? So the concession to the acts, the seeing of the world is given in Anubandham. The concession to manifestation is given in Anubandham, and we are taken from that position of seeing the manifest world to Ishvara and thence to the source. Whereas if we find in Ulladu Narpadu, as Nandakumarji brought it in the concluding part, even the Spurana, which is actually not the manifest Ishvara Shakti. See, normally when we say Ishvara Shakti, we think of a manifest Ishvara Shakti. But here, if we can call it that, it is the unmanifest Ishvara Shakti. The Spurana, in a sense, it's the subtlest manifestation, if one can call it a manifestation. It is not, it is, therefore, Bhagavan says the bridge, probably between the manifest and the unmanifest. Because it's so pure that it can hardly be called a manifestation. But even that is not allowed. in the pure state of being, in the absolute abidance in the self. This is the beautiful journey which Nandakumarji took us through today, and we will find it in Ulladu Narpadu that most of the verses take us through this journey. That in the sense that Bhagavan takes us back to the unmanifest in the first few verses, and after that he remains fully, there is no reference at all to Ishvara except somewhere in the middle we'll get Madikkolitandam Madikkulvalirum. So somewhere there is a reference to the Ishvara Shakti also. There is, as he said, reference to karma. There is reference to various problems faced by us. But in Ulladu Narpadu is available to the atheist. Anubandham may not be available to the atheist. Some verses of Anubandham may not be available to the atheist. Whereas Ulladu Narpadu is fully available to the atheist. Somebody was recently, I forget, in one of our interactions with the devotees, one was saying, Bhagavan's teachings is available even to the atheist. It is available to everyone. And this is a point again which Nandakumarji often brings up even in our interpersonal discussions, that even if somebody has no faith in anything whatsoever, self-inquiry is available to such a person. So Bhagavan has become all-inclusive, and he brought out the beautiful instance of his mother and the mother's helper, and how they can easily relate to the sense of I. Idam aham pada. This is the naninum sorporul, Bhagavan says in Upadesha Saram, and that can be sensed by anybody. That can be, we can also understand that it is there in everyone, but it is possible for us also to relate to it very directly. It may not be clear to begin with, unless one has tried to bring the attention to it. Now, what does the satsang do? What does the Ulladu Narpadu do? It brings the telescope onto it. It brings the magnifying glass or the telescope onto it, because our eyes have become weak. The inner vision has become weak due to non-use. There is something called a lazy eye phenomena. In the lazy eye phenomena, the eye is perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with it. But for some reason, maybe because there was some problem in it or something, the mind has said that I will use the other eye. At one point in our life, it could be, say, the left eye became a lazy eye because the right eye was slightly more powerful or something happened. Then the mind started saying, use your right eye. Over a period of time, the left eye becomes useless. This is called the lazy eye, although it is perfectly functional. Because our inner vision has become a lazy eye. So what happens in this satsang is that Bhagavan's words, they activate that inner eye. They reactivate it. This is the beauty of satsang. They remind us, the words remind us of a truth which is not unknown to us. Because if it were unknown, it could not become known. It's not something which becomes known. We are in a very strange kind of a situation where self-awareness has to be there for every one of us. That's what Bhagavan says. Without self-awareness, how can you be aware of anything else in this world? So self-awareness has to be there. But initially we think, oh, I know I am Sharda, I know I am this identity. Then suddenly Bhagavan comes and asks us, who am I? Then we think, oh, I don't know myself at all. But in Ulladu Narpadu again, Bhagavan will say both these propositions are absurd. So the self is available, but not as an object. Must not be seen as an object. That's why, though Bhagavan gives us all the supports, he also removes the supports as gently as possible. Sometimes if he removes very harshly also, then he knows there is a beautiful miracle connected with Bhagavan of a devotee. When Bhagavan's early years on Arunachala, Bhagavan attributes the miracle to Arunachala, but he is the only one reporting it. And when he reports it, who else? Nobody else knew. He narrates the story. So we recognize that it is him. Of a devotee, maybe a woodcutter, a poor man, and he loses the use of his his legs, becomes paralyzed. And he wants to end his life. He's having crutches. But he is used to doing Girivalam. He goes around the hill. He's used to climbing up the hill also and seeing Bhagavan, but he's unable to do that. He goes around the hill, and at the end of that, suddenly somebody comes to him and says, "You just want to die anyway. What are the use of these crutches to you?" And pulls away the crutches and goes away. And this man he's begging of him, "Don't take away my crutches. Don't take away my crutches." See, the man is actually going to commit suicide. He thinks, "I want to end my life." But he says, "I want my crutches. Don't take away my crutches." And then suddenly he realized that without the crutches, he's actually standing. He is fine. His legs are fine. Everything is fine. So, Bhagavan, if he pulls away any crutch from us, then he must know that we are capable of standing at that point of time. And if he has given us some crutch, if he allows us to hold a crutch at some point of time, he knows that this child of his is at this point is not able to stand on his or her own feet. Okay, then I will give her this support. And I also remember one more example given by Swami Virajananda. It's a sweet example. He would say there are many supports may be given, including the support, the ultimate support of self-inquiry, which Bhagavan gives. But they are all like the pole of the pole vaulter. Self-inquiry is like the pole of the pole vaulter. Now what happens? The pole vaulter uses the pole. Without the pole, he can't jump over to the other side at that height. That's why he is using the pole. It's an impossibility. See, Bhagavan allows us a task, apparent task in self-inquiry, because we are used to doing tasks, to do something which no task can achieve, which is abiding in the self. So this is the only task which can take us closest to non-doing. Every other task will have some element of doership in it, will have duality in it. Whereas this cuts off every duality. That's why Nandakumarji says even the duality of Spurana is not allowed by Bhagavan. Even that is allowed to merge into the self. So he says you can use that Spurana, or if you say self-inquiry itself, you run up to the vault, you have to jump over, you're using a pole, and then what happens, he says, you have to leave the pole behind. You can't say this pole has been so helpful to me. Even the Spurana is so beautiful. See this very beautifully, the Kumarji says, don't ask anything of it, because what happens in the journey, we are actually so tired by the burden of the ego which we are carrying, that the moment we get even a small glimpse or a taste of the self, forget the Spurana, even a small thought-free experience, we enjoy it so much that we want to repeat it. By wanting to repeat it, we are actually saying, I have experienced it, I will hold on to it. We are asking of that, but Nandakumarji keeps telling us, don't ask anything, don't ask anything, not even a repetition of that experience. Nothing, don't ask anything, and it will take you. So we have to leave that behind, he says. Virajananda would say, you have to leave the pole behind. If you wish to carry the pole, then both you and the pole will fall on the same side. You cannot go across. So you have to leave that, the absolute Bhagavan, which he says in Aksharamadamala, Nakkana Nindranai, that is where he is taking us. And I think it is his great grace that he has allowed us. He has said, okay, you can take supports, and these are the supports you can take. We may seek. Muruganar Swami says, people seek thousands of supports. Yattanayo Shardu. Yattanayo Sarva. People have thousands of support. Our every thought is the support we are seeking. So we have thousands of supports. Instead of that, what Bhagavan has done in Anubandham is sweetly he has made a few supports. He has given us a few very safe supports. So if we feel at sometimes shaky, we can say, okay, let me hold one of these safe supports. Let me not hold a support which is like climbing on a crocodile. He has told us about the unsafe supports also. You can't cross a river in a crocodile. You can't want fame as a support. You can't want something else. He has warned us about the unsafe supports that we seek, and he has given us a few safe supports that we could hold on to, which could be the Hridaya Sthana, it could be the Ishvara Shakti, it could be the Chidakasha, whatever these safe supports have been listed. So we know, okay, if the mind is seeking any other support, we realize it is seeking a support, let it not seek. If possible, let us get back into the self itself. That is the only support really. There is nothing apart from that. But if still we don't have the power to do so, then we have been taken through this journey of Ulladu Narpadu, Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, which is clearly telling us, don't go into these dangerous areas under any circumstances, because that is going to be going to destroy your sadhana. Don't go there. And if you feel the need for support, you can take one of these supports. But the purpose of a support, like the purpose of the pole, is to cross over. That is where Bhagavan is taking us now back into the Ulladu Narpadu. The purpose is to cross over into Ulladu Narpadu. The Anubandham's purpose is to help us cross back into Ulladu Narpadu to get further strength. We went through Ulladu Narpadu. Then he has allowed it to come out and again to go back inside. This is a cycle. We find even in Ramanacentre, I would often wonder, Bhagavan will take us to the ultimate, then he seems to bring us back. Then again he takes us, then he brings us back. One of the Ramakrishna Math Swamiji's, I don't remember the name of the book, he says, sometimes one feels that sadhana is like a spiral staircase. In a spiral staircase, he says there is a little bit of coming down and then going up again. I don't know. But he says there is a little, in the very spiraling, there is a little coming down before you go up to the next. There's a little coming down before you go up to the next, he says. That's what he describes it as. So it happens when you climb a mountain anyway. Because if you reach one peak, you have to get down into the next valley. Then you have to go up to that other peak. It may feel as if you're going down. But actually you're not going down. You're going down in relation to the peak which you have reached. But it is only the way to the next peak. That is how it has to happen. So Bhagavan allows us this, and then he will take us back until we are not able to, and again, they are beautifully reminded by Nandakumarji, until we are steadily abiding in the self-inquiry will not leave us. That is the grace of Bhagavan. What more can we ask for? Until we are abiding in that, won't leave us. So Sadhuam Swami says, Kundu Selvare Orudinam Midaya Guhayil Ramana Gurunathan. He will take us back. He will make us abide in the source or abide in the self, which is our own true nature. We can call it grace, we can call it the self itself, because they are not different from each other. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana to all.
Ramananjali, Ramananjali, Ramananjali.